everybody. This is May Doldell from YesFinanciallyFree.com. Today we're reading from the book South Sea Bubble from Memoirs of Extraordinary Popular Delusions and the Madness of Crowds. Page 69 today. This is a free ebook. The link to the ebook can be found in my blog, YesFinanciallyFree.com. You can also get a free ebook, Working Parents Guide to Financial Freedom, by going to the right side, put your first name, email address, and hit the big red yes button. You'll also get on my email list where I send out an email every day before I go live and with all the links you need to jump on. All right, so a little bit about myself. I live in Waikiki with my husband, Jamel, and our 7-year-old son, Jordan. He's on the couch. And it's summer break, so I'm reading a book for summer break. I have a great blog with lots of information, resources about financial freedom. Now, I started my journey back in 2008, 9. Now, by 2011, I had over $40,000 of credit card debts, which I didn't feel good about. I had a job. I had no property. Right now, we own this property, another one down the street in Waikiki. But back then, I owned no property. Never had. It was like a dream that I had. So I learned techniques on financial freedom from various gurus, authors, programs I went to, and I used them. So by 2016, I was debt-free. Our family's net worth had improved by over $500,000. We were making almost $500 a month in passive income. I quit my job December 23rd, 2016 was my last day. I am a full-time mother. Part-time, I coach clients to do what I did, which is create more free time, right? Create more free time for yourself and for your family. I spent about 3-4 hours with Jordan at the beach on Monday. Spend time with them every day. I spend lots of time with my husband, my son, my mom, and friends who come in town to visit Hawaii. So I want you to have the same kind of lifestyle. So check out the blog and read along with the book. We are learning. The last time we read it, there was a South Sea company. It was created to help take on the debt of England. So England wasn't so good at its spending. It asked a company to take it over. The company stocks went through the roof, and then people started fabricating stories, making it go higher and higher. It was a bubble. And people started making other companies, like crazy companies, some that said they weren't even going to tell you what they did, and they sold money, and people were just throwing money at things, hoping to get rich quick. Now the bubble is finally bursting. Stock prices have sank, and now we're talking about the bottom. Yeah, we're on page 69. During the progress of this famous bubble, England presented a singular spectacle. The public mind was in a state of unwholesome fermentation. People were no longer satisfied with the slow but sure profits of cautious industry. The hope of boundless wealth for the morrow made them heedless and extravagant for today. A luxury till then unheard of was introduced, bringing its train a corresponding laxity of morals. The overbearing insolence of ignorant men who had arisen to sudden wealth by successful gambling made men of true gentility of mind and manners blush that gold should have power to raise the unworthy in the scale of society. The haughtiness of some of these ciphering cits, as they were termed by Sir Richard Steele, was remembered against them in the day of their adversity. In the parliamentary inquiry, many of the directors suffered more for their insolence than for their peculation. One of them, who in the full-blown pride of an ignorant rich man had said that he would feed his horse upon gold, was reduced almost to bread and water for himself. Every haughty look, every overbearing speech was set down and repaid them 100-fold in poverty and humiliation. The state of matters all over the country was so alarming that George I shortened his intended stay in Hanover and returned in all haste to England. He arrived on the 11th of November, and Parliament was summoned to meet on the 8th of December. In the meantime, public meetings were held in every considerable town of the empire, at which petitions were adopted praying the vengeance of the legislature upon the South Sea directors, who, by their fraudulent practices, had brought the nation to the brink of ruin. Nobody seemed to imagine that the nation itself was as culpable as the South Sea Company. Nobody blamed the credulity and avarice of the people, the degrading lust of gain, which had swallowed up every nobler quality in the national character, or the infatuation which had made the multitude run their heads with such frantic eagerness into the net held out for them by scheming projectors. These things were never mentioned. The people were simple, honest, hardworking people, ruined by a gang of robbers who were to be hanged, drawn, quartered without mercy. This was the almost unanimous feeling of the country. The two houses of Parliament were not more reasonable. Before the guilt of the South Sea directors was known, punishment was the only cry. The king, in his speech from the throne, expressed his hope that they would remember that all their prudence, temper, and resolution were necessary to find out and apply the proper remedy for their misfortunes. In the debate on the answer to the address, several speakers indulged in the most violent invectives against the directors of the South Sea project. The Lord Molesworth was particularly vehement. It had been said by some that there was no law to punish the directors of the South Sea Company, who were justly looked upon as the authors of the present misfortunes of the state. In his opinion, they ought upon this occasion to follow the example of the ancient Romans, who, having no law against parricide, because their legislators supposed no son could be so unnaturally wicked as to imbrue his hands in his father's blood, made a law to punish this heinous crime as soon as it was committed. Parricide. They adjudged the guilty wretch to be sown in a sack and thrown alive into the Tiber. He looked upon the contrivers and executors of the villainous South Sea scheme as the parricides of their country, and should be satisfied to see them tied in like manners in sacks and thrown into the Thames. Other members spoke with as much want of temper and discretion. Mr. Walpole was more moderate. He recommended that their first care should be to restore public credit. If the city of London were on fire, all wise men would aid in extinguishing the flames and preventing the spread of the conflagration, before they inquired after the incendiaries. Public credit has received a dangerous wound and lay bleeding, and they ought to apply a speedy remedy to it. It was time enough to punish the assassins afterward. On the 9th of December, an address in answer to His Majesty's speech was agreed upon after an amendment which was carried without a division, that words should be added expressive of the determination of the House not only to seek a remedy for the national distresses, but to punish the authors of them. The inquiry proceeded rapidly. The directors were ordered to lay before the House a full account of all proceedings. Resolutions were passed to the effect that the calamity was mainly owing to the vile arts of stock jobbers, that nothing could tend more to the reestablishment of public credit than a law to prevent this infamous practice. Mr. Walpole then rose and said that, as he had previously hinted, he had spent some time upon a scheme for restoring public credit, but that the execution of it depending upon a position which had been laid down as fundamental, he thought it proper, before he opened out his scheme, to be informed whether he might rely upon that foundation. It was whether the subscription of public debts and encumbrances, money subscriptions, and other contracts made with the South Sea Company should remain in the present state. This question occasioned an animated debate. It was finally agreed by a majority, 259 against 117, that all these contracts should remain in their present state, unless altered for the relief of the proprietors by the General Court of the South Sea Company, or set aside by due course of law. On the following day, Mr. Walpole laid before a committee of the whole House his scheme for the restoration of public credit, which was in substance to engraft 9 millions of South Sea stock into the Bank of England and the same sum into the East India Company upon certain conditions. The plan was favorably received by the House. After some few objections, it was ordered that proposals should be received from the two great corporations. They were both unwilling to lend their aid, and the plan met with a warm but fruitless opposition at the General Court summoned for the purpose of deliberating upon it. They, however, ultimately agreed upon the terms on which they would consent to circulate the South Sea bonds, and their report being presented to the committee, a bill was brought in under the superintendence of Mr. Walpole, and safely carried through both the Houses of Parliament. A bill was at the same time brought in for restraining the South Sea directors, governor, sub-governor, treasurer, cashier, and clerks from leaving the kingdom for a 12th month, and for discovering their estates and effects and preventing them from transporting or alienating the same. All the most influential members of the House supported the bill. Mr. Shippen, seeing Mr. Secretary Craggs in his place, and believing the dangerous rumors that were afloat of that minister's conduct in the South Sea business, determined to touch him to the quick. He said he was glad to see a British House of Commons resuming its pristine vigor and spirit, and acting with so much unanimity for the public good. It was necessary to secure the persons and estates of the South Sea directors and their officers, but, he added, looking fixedly at Mr. Craggs as he spoke, there were other men in high station whom in time he would not be afraid to name, who were no less guilty than the directors. Mr. Craggs arose in great wrath and said that if the innuendo were directed against him, he was ready to give satisfaction to any man who questioned him, either in the House or out of it. Loud cries of order immediately arose on every side. In the midst of the uproar, Lord Molesworth got up and expressed his wonder at the boldness of Mr. Craggs in challenging the whole House of Commons, and he, Lord Molesworth, though somewhat old, past 60, would answer Mr. Craggs whatever he had to say in the House, and he trusted there were plenty of young men beside him who would not be afraid to look Mr. Craggs in the face out of the House. Cries of order against resounded from every side. The members arose simultaneously. Everybody seemed to be vociferating at once. The speaker in vain called order. The confusion lasted several minutes, during which Lord Molesworth and Mr. Craggs were almost the only members who kept their seats. At last, the call for Mr. Craggs became so violent that they thought proper to submit the universal feeling of the House and explain his unparliamentary expression. He said that by giving satisfaction to the impugners of his conduct in the House, he did not mean that he would fight, that he would explain his conduct. Here the matter ended, and the House proceeded to debate in what manner they should conduct their inquiry into the affairs of the South Sea Company, whether in a grand or a select committee. Ultimately, a secret committee of 13 was appointed, with power to send for persons, papers, and records. The Lords were as zealous and as hasty as the Commons. The Bishop of Rochester said the scheme had been like a pestilence. The Duke of Wharton said the House ought to shew no respect of persons, that for his part he would give up the dearest friend he had, and if he had been engaged in the project. The nation had been plundered in a most shameful and flagrant manner, and he would go as far as anybody in the punishment of the offenders. Lord Stanhope said that every farthing possessed by the criminals, whether directors or not directors, ought to be confiscated and to make good the public losses. Okay, we're ending on page 73. Thanks so much for being on today's live video. I'm live every day, weekday at the same time, 7:45 a.m. Hawaii time. You can also check out all replays on my blog, yesfinanciallyfree.com. Thanks for being on Instagram. Hi, Ernst Sanjeev. Aloha. See you again tomorrow. Thanks for being on YouTube. Subscribe to the YouTube channel to get the automated notifications when I'm live, and check out the link to the blog post in the description. Thanks for being on Facebook Live.